Hey Greg, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really grateful that you came here and we're gonna chat a bit and it's gonna be a whole bunch of fun. So what's new with you?
Well, it feels like deja vu here in January 2022, but keeping my head on and putting one foot in front of the other, staying in recovery and trying to do the next right thing best I can.
A recipe for getting on through.
Yes.
Right.
We're
Well,
looking for more brighter days
yeah,
in the near future, hopefully.
right on. Oh, they're here. They're here. And you help make days brighter for all of us, man. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So, hey, who are you?
Well, I am Greg Williams. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And for me, that means that, today I'm, a father and a husband and the person that I look at in the mirror that, I like the person that I am today. And that wasn't always my experience in my life. But yeah, there's a lot in that question that we can unpack as you wish.
Right on, right on. Greg Williams, person thriving in long-term recovery. I can relate. I can relate. There was a time I did not like the feller that I saw in the mirror, and part of my recovery definition today is, while I'm not exactly in love with the fellow in the mirror, he's all right. He's all right. I'm okay with that. So you're let's talk about how we met and in North Carolina.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to go on a fact-finding mission about the new recovery advocacy movement, and pulling together an independent film called The Anonymous People. And I wanted to capture people doing recovery organizing work, and how they did it in a format that in a media format that I grew passionate about as a young person. And I was blessed to be able to finish The Anonymous People. And when that came out, it became a really strong vehicle for recovery organizations. And so you all invited me down to Raleigh, to the capital area. And, here I am, this behind the scenes producer, and you want me to stand on a stage and give a rah, political speech. And so it was, terribly uncomfortable for me, but I had a lot of fun with the folks in North Carolina, and it's doing probably the most uncomfortable thing that people ask me to do, which is, large outdoor rallies with a microphone. not my thing.
You did great, and it really helped us to organize what is now still a statewide recovery community organization. I still remember being a peer at a long-term social model residential recovery facility, sitting at a case management desk and watching just the trailer.
Our numbers are unbelievably strong, but yet we have no voice.
We know about every issue out there, but people don't know how important the issue of recovery is.
As a person in long-term recovery from an illness that has no cure, but an illness that has a solution.
If we could ever tap those 20 million people in long-term recovery, you change this overnight.
Now it's my turn.
Just the trailer. And I know that y'all put a lot of something into just the trailer, because just those couple minutes, I still remember the goosebumps that I got on my arm at that desk. Things opened up for me, and I ended up using just the trailer a lot in a lot of my education. But we use the Anonymous People in North Carolina as an organizing tool throughout the state, and I think it made short work of creating communities of recovery throughout the state. I'm deeply grateful for you. And as we started promoting recovery high schools in the state, another one of the stories you told is Generation Found. And I'm really super excited about the new film we'll talk about in just a minute. So you're a person in long-term recovery, and that doesn't, we don't really have a shared definition. I mean, many of us rally behind the SEMTA definition right now in the ecumenical recovery culture, but what does recovery mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been evolutionary, process. For me, I think it gets deeper. I mean, evolutionary just means it just gets deeper and deeper over time. It's when I first entered into a residential program, I didn't want recovery. I wasn't seeking recovery. I was kind of scared into seeking treatment by fear of law enforcement repercussions and family obligations and whatnot. And I it wasn't until 15, 20 days kind of removed from chemicals that I started to realize I didn't really like the person looking in the mirror and that I didn't really want to live like that, but I didn't know what I wanted to live like. Today, recovery's kind of at its core for me, the freedom to pursue who I am and who I want to be, because I think addiction and kind of gated that off for me, and it really opened me up back to the ability to unlock that. And then at a really deep level where a lot of people unfortunately don't even, whether they're not in recovery or never struggle with substances, a lot of people never really get that opportunity to kind of take inventory and really take stock about who you are and who you want to be and what you're about.
Wow, I love it. You prefaced it with it's been an evolution, but right now recovery is the freedom to discover who I am and pursue who I want to be. I love that. And you tied it into, honestly, the universal human experience, and that not everybody, whether they are experiencing chaotic relationships with substances or not, really gets the time and space or the wherewithal or the support to do that. So that's great. I dig it. Recovery's, it's a beautiful thing. I share that with you. My definition or my understanding or what recovery means to me has evolved tremendously over the last 17 years. But now I often use the word freedom. It gets thrown out there a lot. Freedom and wellness, connection, stuff like that. Cool. Well, Greg, you're discovering who you are and who you want to be. What do you do? What's your passion right now, man? What's your gig? What's your passion work? What are you up to?
I think I start to consider myself, narrow but deep in two areas, and I kind of like that, in some respects. But the area that people know about me is the film stuff, but the area that I spend a lot of time right now is in healthcare financing and really trying to go after how and why and we buy the health services for people across the continuum of addiction and recovery, and how that should be restructured and reframed, because the fee-for-service construct of you go to inpatient, you go to outpatient, you go to recovery coaching, and then the insurance company or Medicaid plan or state government strokes a check, transactionally based on volume. It doesn't align well with, frankly, anybody's definition of recovery, and different domains of wellness and whatnot. But in other areas of healthcare, we've seen the payers start to evolve and buy health services in a more holistic, more aligned way to recovery. But that's, for other illnesses like cancer or heart disease or other things, they're buying things in a holistic way, because buying services in a fee-for-service doesn't make sense for those chronic illnesses either.
No.
And so we're not that different with substance use disorder, and so we're trying to get people to start behaving that way. And so I lead an organization called the Alliance for Addiction Payment Reform, and we work on incentivizing recovery, not relapse. Is our tagline, and so that's what I do, kind of in one part of my life, and then the other passionate part of my life is developing films with a guy named Jeff Riley, who has been my creative partner through basically every major film project I've been involved in. So he edited
John and Paul.
Jeff edited The Anonymous People and directed Generation Found, and now he's directed Tipping the Pain Scale. But I've got the opportunity to serve as the producer.
Great films. Well, I very much support our transitioning both treatment and recovery supports and payment to more of a chronic illness recovery management model. I'm a person who lives with high blood pressure and asthma, and I know how I readily access the continuing recovery supports and pharmacotherapeutic supports for those. And I know how different it is for folks experiencing substance use disorder, the barriers that exist for them, and how, despite decades of knowledge and experience, and our rhetoric, we still seem to approach it with an acute care model of treatment and incarceration. And I'm really glad that you're doing that strong work of promoting chronic illness recovery management, value-based outcomes, and really holding payers accountable to making more sense in how they pay for our wellness. There's so many of us. There's so many of us that experience this. It's
not even just the right thing to do. It's actually the economically it's actually in everybody's deeply entrenched special interest economic best practice. Like,
across the board.
Across, governments and payers and employers and all the people who fund our patchwork healthcare system that exists, if you can call it a system, but it's in everybody's financial best interest to align how they purchase the services with the patient's wellness and the patient's outcomes, because we'd be a lot more efficient with the dollars that we spend, because I had a colleague, Jim Hood, who in the nonprofit world, he used to say, like, treating addiction the way that we do today, it's like if we just close the addiction treatment gap, the 90% treatment gap for 38 million people, in today's model, it's a $2 trillion problem. It's a $2 trillion solution. And unfortunately, nobody's got the appetite, to just like stroke a $2 trillion check I mean, if this particular model was working and we had, the empirical evidence that it was working, people might be willing to, but in this day and age, unfortunately, we can't justify a $2 trillion investment in the ecosystem that exists today.
We would be investing in a flawed and fractured ecosystem, also within a pathology that has a behavioral component with so much moral entanglement. So folks don't have the wherewithal to close that 90% access gap, but maybe the work that you're doing will help us to help us to get there from the get-go, honestly, with the anonymous people raising the profile of recovery, addressing the stigma surrounding addiction, organizing, mobilizing communities to get this work done. And then you working in the policy and payer space now. So you've evolved in your work in how you're attacking this issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's circumstances in life, for every door that gets closed in your life, another door opens. It's really interesting how things play out. I mean, that's like, to go way back, my first foray in all of this was, a woman named Donna Allegata invited me to tell my story at the state legislature in Connecticut. And I went, and I was 18 or 19 or something, and told my story of recovery, and my dad was there. And the Hartford Courant, the big newspaper in Connecticut, comes up to me and says, hey, can we write a story about you in the Hartford Courant? And I was like, sure. You just can't use my last name, and this is back in like the early 2000s.
Yep.
And the reporter was like, well, you just testified on closed circuit television, like, and I can't use your last name in the newspaper. Like, she was confused, and rightfully she was confused. And I was confused, and so the article comes out, and it's like, Greg W, or whatever, like, it's like the third line of the article, Greg W didn't want to disclose his last name, and it was a good story about a young person who got into recovery and was telling his story. And so Donna calls me up, and she said, what do I read in that line about Greg W didn't want to disclose his last name? And I said, well, that I'm ashamed. And she said, well, if I don't understand the principles of anonymity, or why you wouldn't use your last name in the newspaper, are you telling your story because you're ashamed? And I said, no, I want other people to know that this is possible. And she pointed out that everybody else uses their last name in the newspaper. and ultimately, I started to really explain to her, well, like Google, and I'm going into the media world, and I'm in college, and like, I don't want to be Googled, and blah blah blah. And she said, well, I hear that,
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
But what she said next changed my life, and it was, if your recovery is one of the most important things to you, and somebody in your life is going to close a door to you because of your recovery in your past, that's a door you never wanted open in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean,
that's powerful.
Yeah.
Greg, I never heard that story before, man. I never did.
Gotta save some exclusive nuggets for you.
I mean, similar stories. That's so great. And her wisdom that Greg, the general public, isn't going to understand the nuances of anonymity traditions and 12-step culture, and that what you're actually doing is, you think you're doing a great thing. They're going to see it as shame. Is there shame? And the anonymous people really covers this pretty well. Bill White's quote in that, folks are ashamed. And but from that same story, I do remember his telling me that he was ashamed. He came home from a recovery rally wearing a recovery t-shirt, and Rita said, hey, can you run out to the grocery store and get something? And he's like running to change his t-shirt, and he's like, why am I changing my t-shirt? And
yeah, it's like when we're surrounded by thousands in recovery, we're comfortable, but when it's us alone, the insidiousness of that stigma.
But y'all really helped us.
And what I really realized is, I mean, I wasn't ashamed, but society is ashamed of me, and that gets under your skin. So the societal shame, gets deep, and that was the biggest piece of that film and Tipping the Pain Scale. It's like, people don't like talking about shame, and but if we want to talk about recovery, we got to walk through shame, and we got to talk about shame, and if we want to change policy or we want to change systems, a lot of it has to do with shame.
Indeed. Indeed. Wow. It's complicated,
Yeah.
but we got our work cut out for us. Hey, can you talk about tipping the pain scale? Because I'm hoping putting this out. It's really rolling out with screenings right now, and probably taking some of the same course of being accessible to so many communities to utilize as an organizing tool. What's going on with tipping the pain scale?
Yeah, so this is a feature film about 6 different characters from different walks of life who kind of come together to resolve some of the community issues around addiction in their own communities in very different ways. So we've got people like Lauren Davis, who's a state legislature, a state representative out in Washington State, who passed some laws around, access to treatment. The NFL football Pro Bowler Darren Waller's in the movie, who's telling his story at a different platform. It's been rare for the recovery community to have somebody who's an active professional athlete. Joseph Green is a motivational speaker and educator who works with young people kind of in the early intervention phase, and we got to follow him into the schools and see the work that he does. Marty Walsh, who's now the Secretary of Labor. When we started filming, he was the mayor of Boston. Josh De La Rosa is also an officer De La Rosa in Boston, and we follow him kind of doing outreach work, and Roz Picardo, who's doing street outreach work in the streets of Kensington, Philadelphia. And all these individuals kind of are affecting change at different layers and different societies. And you said it, everybody always wants, like, what's the answer to addiction? What's the answer to, 100,000 people died in the last 12 months? Like, solve it, And it's like, well, let's just legalize everything, or let's just do that. And people look for these soundbite answers to a very complex issue and a very nuanced issue. And so the format of feature documentary really allows for us to get into the nuances and get into the layers of change. And so the film is an anthology that weaves together the different layers of change, the different sides of the coin, of people doing things that you've probably never seen before, and really incredible, sensational things. So we're really excited in how do we get at that underlying pain and really that community pain. And so the film, so tippingthepainscale.com, the film is just releasing now in availability for organizations and communities to see it. Our hope is as COVID subsides a little bit, people want to get people back together and bring people together. So we'll be rolling it out throughout the course of the year in different communities. And that's one thing that certainly I really appreciated with Anonymous People and Generation Found was, it's one thing to sit in your room and watch a film that motivates you and inspires you. It's another thing to sit with 100 other people and feel that same sense of camaraderie and energy. And I mean, that's how recovery schools have popped up in the country, is, a group of people who might have not known each other before, watch a movie and then they say, well, I'm passionate about this, I'm passionate. And then they form a board and an advisory, and 3 years later, they're opening a school. And so that's the kind of stuff that Jeff and I really like to do. And Tipping the Pain Scale is no different. Albeit it's an award-winning film, it's an incredible piece of entertainment.
Indeed.
He's the best feature documentary editor in the country. So I hope people will bring it to their communities.
I intend to. I was fortunate enough to be at the premiere screening in Las Vegas with you, and in a group of people for that collective experience. And I remember all of us being deeply moved. I actually, this is too much information, but I actually cried, and I don't cry very often at all. It's ugly, but therapeutic. And I left with the sensation of this is right on time. This is right on time. And you're telling me about how it's dealing with the complexity of multi-level change and solving these tremendous problems that we have. That's got me excited. So it's time for this film. Groovy. Thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate that. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's Bill White said this all the time, and this is why I get to continue this is, he's like, I could show you all the pictures of the brain. I could show you all the data. I could show you all the stats. You're not going to change what you believe about this issue or what you believe about other people, until you know somebody close to you. And it's like this old saying of going through the heart to get to the head. We have all the data, we have all the science, but somehow we got to penetrate people's hearts. So this medium, hopefully helps people like you and other change agents in their communities penetrate more hearts, to want to do stuff, because this certainly takes a village, and a lot of the change needs to happen on the local level too. We always look at our president or this or that to fix this, and this is a community by community challenge to fix. Indeed.
Penetrating hearts. I love it. Hey, listen, we also talk about, because this podcast also raises the profile of many pathways of recovery, diverse faces and voices. One thing I always try to put forward is that recovery isn't a daily trudge through a veil of tears. It's joyful, and we have fun. And what do you do for you? What do you do for kicks? What do you do for self-care or whatever?
Yeah, I definitely a big sports fan, so I watch a lot of sports. So that's one thing. I used to play a lot of sports myself, and I had little ones. So now asking me that question, often involves, puzzles and Legos and, those kinds of things.
Yep.
I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So my days are pretty full. So I don't get enough self-care as I want to, but I still really do enjoy recovery support meetings and trying to be of service where I can, but certainly as my kids are young, it's a lot in the house and being there.
I remember.
It fills the cup. Yeah.
It fills the cup. You're a family man, Greg. Family man. And I know that your work and your creative work is likely also part of your joy and part of your self-care. It's one thing I've discovered: the older I get and the more integrated my life comes and the less compartmented it is. But I like your mentioning that you still commune with your fellows, and that's part of it. And I do that as well. And that's my special time with my people.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, and you said it, in terms of what really, this independent documentary stuff doesn't necessarily, pay any bills or anything like that. But like when you can tell somebody's story in a way that helps other people cry and feel them, there's nothing that I've ever experienced in my life that is more rewarding than that. And you take marginalized individuals and you give them a bigger voice, or you give them a platform. It's not even giving them, but they allow you to capture their voice and capture their platform, but you're able to share it with a broader community than might have never heard their story before.
Sounds super rewarding. And I hope more folks tell you how you penetrated their heart, because I imagine that's part of your salary. And so I'm sure you're getting plenty of that. I always like to hear, man, this changed me. That's my favorite feedback for anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's and what you're doing with this podcast, I mean, it is. There's no more rewarding. It was, I think there's a woman who I now call a friend. I think it was Rachel Goss, wrote something that I hung on to, and she, it was, recovery changed my life.
Yeah.
This film changed my recovery.
Mm.
And it's like, that's,
Yeah.
that gets at what this is about, right? Is this medium is a special medium. We are auditory, visual human beings, and
Facts.
what we can do with words and pictures and all of that, still doesn't beat getting together in person, but next best thing,
Next best thing. Yes, indeed. Well, Greg, we always finish. I keep saying we, and I always feel like a knucklehead when I say we. It's just me.
You're the producer, the talent, the producer, you're everything. I can relate.
We always finish with.
You have multiple.
We
you have
hear
multiple,
it. No thanks,
you have
but yes.
multiple roles of this production.
We always finish with a message. And do you have a message for listeners?
Yeah, share something with somebody today that you've been meaning to share, and you have.
Right on. Share something with someone today you've been meaning to share. Don't hold on to it. Cool. I dig it. Well, Greg, I know you got plenty of work to do. I know I do too. So I hope to see you again real soon. Maybe down my neck of the woods, your neck of the woods, something.
Yeah. I think I'm headed your way soon. So we'll link up, and I'd love to have a meal and catch up. I really appreciate this, and thanks for the conversation, the dialogue. This will be the highlight of my day today.
Oh, far out.
appreciate some time to, reflect and to have some fun.
All right, buddy. Let me hit it.